Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. Heidi and her team here do a great job, and regretfully, Ruth Stricker can't be here tonight as she's prepping for a major awards ceremony to her over at McAllister College, I think tomorrow or the next day. And of course, Ruth has done incredible work here at the Marsh and for McAllister and for the Minneapolis Institute of Arts in so many unrecognized ways. And last time I spoke here, I talked about how she was one of the initial people to actually support the work of Herb Benson and his work in mind-body self-care, relaxation response. He would not have been able to do his work at Harvard without Ruth's support. And so, since Ruth doesn't like applause, let's just give her a hand right now, because she's just great. And I'd also like to recognize that I'm joined by some fabulous colleagues from Minnesota Personalized Medicine. Back is June Lavalure, physician, gynecologist. June, please stand. She is unique in the 5 or 6 or 7 state area for being specially certified around sexual health issues, particularly with their medical challenges. She's unique in our community, and I want all of you to know about the fabulous gifts that she brings to such care. And so thank you, June, for being here. And also is Dr. Kat Hopkins, osteopath, honored by Alina as being in the absolute top 1% of all communicators among the 3,700 physicians in the Alina healthcare system. She is beloved by so many patients, and she is a stellar team member with her focus on thyroid and with autoimmune and with gut health, and a great, I love the colleagues at Minnesota Personalized Medicine. So thank you so much for being here as well. Here we are. So thank you all for being here. Now, tonight is going to be, it's intentionally to be meaningful and worth your time. Even if you've heard me speak before, it's this is going to be new stuff. And in fact, what has been going on in the work of the microbiome has been, in some sense, science fiction for some time. It's unbelievable. Now we're moving from that more towards science fact. And it is stunning. And so I'm going to share with you insights around autoimmune disease, around diabetes, around neurodegenerative disease, including things like Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's and the like. We're going to discover that actually 3 take-home points. Number 1, gut health is the basis of all health. Number 2 is the gut is much more of a garden than a gutter. And point number 3 is our challenge is to be the best possible gardeners. And that means attention to good seeds, good soil, and good support. Okay, that's the outline for the talk. Now let's move into some little specifics. As you may know, I wrote this book, co-authored with Mark Weisberg 5 years ago. There's been a lot of updating, but the fundamentals are still true. And if anyone's interested in a copy, we'll have some available afterwards. Key point. What does it mean to be human anymore? I always thought human was autonomous, free and independent. But in fact, we are outnumbered by the bacteria. In fact, the bacteria in our gut outnumber us it's kind of 100 to 1. Who's in charge? It's actually a very radical question, and the answers might stun you. But the fact that we are more microbes than human, so to speak, it kind of resorts our way of thinking about what does it mean to really be human, and also resorts what exactly we should be teaching in medical school these days. Because in fact, if we're much more microbe than human, why are we spending our time on just the human aspect of things? And of course, that will be changing. One of the reasons it's changing is because of all the work in the microbiome. Now, what is stunning is we've got like 23,000 plus or minus some genes. That kind of blew people away because they said, hey, we're top of the ladder, we probably have like 1 million plus genes. Oh, we do, but they're not ours. There are microbiome, our intestinal bacteria have far more DNA than we do. That gives them a much more greater capacity to evolve and be able to respond to situations. But it also is kind of interesting because in my practice, I spend a lot of time over here working on the human genome. It's a very powerful tool for understanding one's uniqueness and getting at a very deep level, but it's not the whole story. The question now in 2018 is, why aren't we spending even more time over here on the DNA, the microbiome, and our genomics within our gut? And you'll see why that's going to be really, really, really important. And we now are developing the tools to be able to do that. But the key point is that when we think about the bacteria in our gut, the 100 trillion bacteria or so, we're really talking about not who's in charge or a command control type way of looking at it. It's really much more of a working together. It's a symbiosis. We scratch their back, they scratch ours. And in fact, internally, this is all taking place. And over evolutionarily, how we have gone through this is that we have actually co-evolved. In fact, we've incorporated elements of our bacteria. In fact, one could say that our mitochondria are all derived from bacteria. In fact, so throughout our whole gene line, we're saying that, oh, bacteria have been part of the whole picture. But it's more than that. We are now discovering that it's a bacteria in our gut regulate mood, memory, energy, sleep, generalized oomph power, and a lot more. Behavior. Behavior can be driven by our gut bacteria. Now, the wildest story, and this sounds like science fiction, but the toxoplasmosis organism, Toxoplasmosis gondii, it needs help to propagate. Now, one of the things that helps propagate it are cats. But how does it get into the cat? Through the mouse or through the rat. It actually is picked up by rats, and it actually changes their behavior. They are no longer afraid of cats. In fact, they are actually attracted to cats. So actually the rat comes to the cat, which is then eaten, and the cat then can reproduce the toxoplasmosis. Huh. So has anyone ever felt driven to eat a cookie? Well, it may not be the devil making you do it. It may actually be a certain bacteria. So the 3 take-home messages that I really wanted to drive home is what? Gut health is the foundation of all health. Our gut's much more than a garden, and our mission is to be good gardeners. So let's talk about what do we mean by gut health as being the foundation of all health. And so for this, I have a little picture, but I don't know if this is going to show very well. So let me just step up here and explain a little bit. In the center here are bacteria. What does it do? It promotes fat storage. Has anyone ever known anyone who can eat a cracker and gain 5 pounds? Or eat a whole loaf of bread and not gain an ounce? Bacteria. Angiogenesis, kind of blood vessel, immune system. We require gut bacteria to develop our immune system. If we were born without any bacteria at all, our immune system would be very immature, and we would have very little luck in the greater world. Key thing is, our gut bacteria are very active at producing a lot of vitamins for us, and actually amino acid as well, things which are important for, again, mood, memory, energy, sleep, generalized oomph power. Metabolism of drugs. can be completely dependent upon gut bacteria. Modification of the nervous system, we'll cover that a little bit later. Digestion, absolutely. We do not have enough genes to digest a lot of carbohydrates. We depend upon bacterial genes to be able to enable us to digest a lot. If we didn't have them, poor digestion. Resistance to pathogens. In fact, friendly bacteria, a definition of friendly bacteria means they take up space. So there's no room on the bus for the thugs. And it's really nice to have a bus with no thugs. Protection against epithelial injury, and even kind of modulation of bone mineral density. Osteoporosis is a function of gut bacteria. Wow. But there's more to the story. And this is really wild. Okay. One of these mice has been bred to be obese. One has been bred to be thin. Can you tell which one is which? Of course it's a trick question, but the story is that the mouse that you see that is obese here has the genes of a thin mouse. The mouse that's thin has the genes for obesity. How could this be? Well, the story is that if you take germ-free mice, so there's mice in a very special setting that is, they have no gut bacteria at all from birth, kept in sterile environments, and then you feed them a pellet from an obese adult human or a thin adult human, and you're going to see that they develop the very things that we see in the human. So the key point here, I tried to hammer home again and again for audiences, for people concerned about obesity or excessive thinness, it is not some kind of moral failing around Oreos. It is, in fact, a big part of what's going on inside the gut. And that can be destroyed by a lot of things in our environment, including antibiotics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if we take this idea of thin and heavy mice, and we do the same type of program where we have germ-free mice, and we then give them a pellet from a child who's been starving in Malawi with I'm going to mispronounce this, kwashiorkor, and then a child, and then a sibling who does not have that form of malnutrition. The mouse who receives the pellet from the child, the malnourished child, will then proceed to lose 30% of their body weight, whereas the mouse receives the pellet from the normal child goes on. So in fact, actually, it can work either way, towards obesity or towards thinness. In either case, we're going to extremes based on what has been going on in the gut of the person who donated the pellet. And it gets wilder. Okay, so the first type idea is autoimmune disease. And so what are autoimmune diseases? We're thinking about like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and ulcerative colitis and thyroid disease, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the origin of a lot of these autoimmune diseases actually resides in the gut. And how does this work? How does this play out? Well, first is the theory of molecular mimicry. What is molecular mimicry? Molecular mimicry is when there is a sequence of markers on a microbe that is paralleled by the same sequence on regular human tissue. The immune system gets sensitized to the markers on the microbe and reacts against the human tissue. Example, if someone has a genetic risk called HLA-B27 and they have an overgrowth of Klebsiella pneumoniae, a thug, in the gut, ankylosing spondylitis or Crohn's disease. Why is this? Well, we see this in this molecular mimicry in multiple locations throughout, or multiple examples we can say. So for example, you've heard about getting that it was the cowpox that Jenner discovered that turned into the smallpox vaccine. The cowpox, which is not lethal to humans, is similar enough to smallpox, which is lethal to humans, that you can then immunize against it, that they're close enough. Likewise, this year the flu shot is pretty much worthless because there's just a slight variation that occurred during processing, so it's no longer similar. But this idea about biosimilarity, we see it in people who are allergic to ragweed. Anyone here with ragweed allergy? Fall allergies? Yes. And spring allergies, birch pollen, for example. Eat a raw apple, and the marker on the raw apple is mistaken by the body going, ragweed, react, react, react. Or birch pollen, react, react, react. It's not birch pollen. It's the apple. You're not allergic to the apple. It's just the body is mistaking the marker on the apple for being the irritant, requiring a response. If you bake the apple, the markers are gone. Not a problem. So there's this cross-reactivity, molecular mimicry. The same thing occurs going on in the gut. And so there are at least 16 different bacteria now known to be strongly correlated with autoimmune diseases. So rheumatoid arthritis, Proteus mirabilis, the list goes on and on and on. And so now we can actually look for those. Diabetes. Obviously, diabetes is a huge concern. So how much of it is due to diet? And is there a diet for diabetes? Well, yes, there are standardized diets, but what is now turned out to be, appears to be true, is that actually there is no one-size-fits-all diet. Research done in Israel, which has been picked up by the Mayo Clinic, goes like this. They took a large group of people with type 2 diabetes and put them all on the same diet and had an implanted 24/7, 365 glucose monitor. And they could follow the rise and fall based on diet. What did they discover? For some people, something like a tomato, poof. And for others, no big deal. For some people, a strawberry, poof, the blood sugar goes way out of control. For others, not a big deal at all. And they were able to track this down to the gut ecology. And now the supercomputers at Mayo are running, and they're going to actually come out now with a customized diet plan based on a poop sample that people submit. And we'll be able to say, here's the diet for you for optimizing diabetes. Now, the headlines along this are really interesting. Woohoo! Some people with diabetes can eat a whole bowl of ice cream and not worry. Or some people can eat a whole bowl of rice and not worry. So in fact, actually, and people said, can I sign up for the ice cream? but in fact, actually, it's just all going down to the gut bacteria. Now, the last thing is, which on this particular topic is neurodegenerative disease. And this is a key issue for, quote, an aging population that's totally focused on being healthy and minimizing being overweight and everything. What are we finding about neurodegenerative disease? This is the science fiction part that is actually science fact. If we go back to the germ-free mice, okay, clean slate, and they are designed, genetically programmed to actually produce a lot of a Parkinson's disease-related compound called alpha-synuclein. In the absence of bacteria, they are neurologically intact. You restore the bacteria, and they start demonstrating Parkinsonian-like behavior. Same thing, go back to blank slate. Same animals, same story with the predisposition to Parkinson's disease through a genetic manipulation. And you give them poop from a wide variety of people. What you find is that actually there's a great variation in the degree of the abnormal neurological behavior that you see. Okay, back to the whole story now. Take regular germ-free mice, and who are not predisposed to develop Parkinson's disease. You give half of them poop from a healthy adult human, and half from a human with Parkinson's disease. And what do you find? Just like with the obese and the thin mouse, you find that the mouse that receives the poop from the adult with Parkinson's disease demonstrates the very thing that Parkinson's disease looks like. So that is, they develop the same neurological signs and symptoms. And here we thought Parkinson's disease was a brain disease. And now there is an abundance of medical literature documenting that it's actually a gut issue. So likewise, you say, well, okay, there's Parkinson's disease. What about Alzheimer's? Any relationship with Alzheimer's in the gut? And yes, there is. And Alzheimer's is characterized by a lot of deposition of beta amyloid plaques in the brain. Well, lo and behold, beta amyloid can be produced by our gut bacteria. Not friendly gut bacteria, thugs. Overgrowth of thugs, you have an overgrowth of this particular bacteria, or product of the bacteria. These things transport up through the major highway, the vagus nerve, and then can cross into the brain. So what we're discovering is that, lo and behold, we ought to be paying a lot of attention to gut health as being the foundation of all health. And these were just kind of scary examples, some recent things, including work done by colleagues over at the University of Wisconsin, Madison, on the Parkinson's disease story. So let's talk about the second take-home message, that our guts are much more of a garden than a gutter. And what do we mean by a garden? Well, a lot of us are gardeners here in Minnesota, and what do we worry about? We worry about watering. You know, it's kind of, if you're a simple gardener like me, you worry about how much sunlight. It's kind of like, is the hosta going to grow here? Are the flowers going to bloom here? You worry about, oh, can we water the plants every day? It requires a lot of care, and who's going to do the weeding and stuff like that. There are all these things that go into gardening. But one of the things is that the importance of the fence. You know, the deer, the rabbits, the other things want to get in and eat our plants. So if we want a good garden, sometimes we have to have a good fence. So in fact, actually, this whole idea about good fences make good neighbors applies to us as well. On one side of our internal fence is us. The other side of our fence is them, the 100 trillion bacteria. Hopefully they're friendly, or if they're not. Well, one of the key things is the care and maintenance of this fence is not done by us. It's done by our gut bacteria. We do not feed the cells lining the gut. Our gut bacteria feed and nourish the cells lining the gut. Our friendly bacteria. In the absence of the friendly bacteria, in the absence of the capacity to produce a specific small chain fatty acid called butyrate, the wall starves. What happens when you don't have good maintenance on a fence? It gets rickety. Not so good. In fact, good fences do make good neighbors. And if we have a rickety fence, then we can't really know to keep things out and let things in. Everything just crosses. And it goes by kind of a lot of people talk about leaky gut. Well, in some sense, this is what we mean. We mean bacterial translocation of bacterial products into the body that requires an immune response. And this is what is a driver of type 2 diabetes. It's a driver of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, atherosclerosis, and increasingly all types of neuroinflammatory processes, including the neurodegenerative diseases that we're concerned about. But the newest data is that the fence is not only between our gut bacteria and us, but we actually have a fence, a blood-brain barrier, and that too can get leaky. And the blood-brain barrier is literally supposed to be a barrier, keep everything out unless there's very special desire to bring something in. But if you open the gates and let everything in, that sets off a neuroinflammatory response in the brain, and that can lead to neuronal cell loss. So it means change in cognition, change in memory, change in mood. Both anxiety and depression have been linked to this. And this is where the future is going to be going. We're going to be worried, yes, fence number 1 and fence number 2, our gut and our brain. And if fence number 1 is broken, then it's more likely that fence number 2 is going to be broken, if not addressed. Now, I'm going to slip by this picture. We just talked about it. So let's go to take-home message number 3. Our mission is to be good gardeners, master gardeners. This means good seeds, good soil, good support. So let's talk about good seeds. Think about, you don't want lousy seeds, do you? It's hard to grow a good garden if the seeds are lousy. All the attention to heirloom seeds, all the attention to all the concerns about what's been going on in terms of with Monsanto-ized products and the like. There's been a lot of awareness now that actually seeds are our heritage. We need to be taking good care of them. But likewise, when we think about our own health, we have to be concerned about the seeds for our own health. And so that's where I want to kind of emphasize the 5 fundamentals. Fundamental number 1, breathing. Most of us breathe every day. Very few of us know how. Athletes do, opera stars do, people who have been practicing yoga and meditation do. It's a learned skill. It's an acquired skill. How do we get that? Practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. So it's no different than the idea about sitting down at the piano. A classic way to begin is 1, intention. Set time. Oftentimes I would ask people to start out at a minute a day of intentional breathing. Breathing in through the nose, slowly feeling this cool air come in, and slowly releasing through the mouth. I say start at a minute a day. And all too often people would come back a month or 2 months later and say, oh, how was it? Oh, I just couldn't find the time. I said, well, okay, let's make it a little bit easier. Let's make it 15 seconds. You're waiting for the elevator. You're at a red light. It's kind of like you're at the line at the grocery store. A shocking number of people would come back a month or 2 later and say they couldn't do the 15 seconds. I said, oh, well, this is an important finding. So it's kind of, wow, let's talk about this. It's kind of 15 minutes is 1% of your day. 15 seconds is what percent of the day? And so then you can introduce all kinds of other dangerous topics like, how often do you talk deeply with your spouse? Oh, well, then you can get into a variety of other concerns. But the idea is that breathing is a fundamental and is something that actually literally can reset our balance. And we think about just like walking a tightrope, up and down, it's a balancing act. A wind comes along, you counterbalance to maintain your vertical status. Same thing, our body is kind of like balancing up, sympathetic up, parasympathetic down, catabolic up, anabolic, the whole bit. Everything is a balancing act. Breathing is a fundamental resetting of the balance. So if you ever are feeling out of balance, breathing is important to restore that balance. It's an acquired skill, and part of the skill is even setting aside time to do it. Why am I putting this here? It's the most fundamental of all the fundamentals for ensuring actually a healthy gut. High stress hormone levels, cortisol, actually activate a lot of the thugs in our gut. A lot of the thugs in our gut are actually there quietly, hiding, waiting. They've got sensors out there. If there's enough of the cortisol out there, it activates their virulence factors. And they say, hoo-hoo, now's our time. So, key point is breathing helps lower stress hormone levels, restores balance. It's the most fundamental of the fundamentals. Second fundamental, eating. Anyone seen any diet books around lately? I was so shocked at Barnes & Noble the other day. I think I counted like 45 different diet books out on the shelf, or on the tables, and they're great titles. They're very enticing, and it just shows that it's kind of, one is there's a lot of fervor in this area, two is there's a lot of opinions, and three is there's a lot of different perspectives that we can bring to looking at eating. A couple perspectives I'd like to share with you today is one, kind of a focus, and it's kind of like, what is the carbohydrate content of your diet? What type of carbohydrates? Two, what is your eating pattern? That is, number one, timing. Are you eating at midnight and getting up at 6 a.m. and eating again, or not? Three is just kind of, we talk about quantities, but as I just pointed out, quantities aren't really the whole picture. It's really kind of quality of what we're doing is kind of a part of the whole picture. The fourth thing is, are you eating alone? I share this because eating is one of the great sensual pleasures of life. It is what brings us together. And yes, there's nice times where it's good and practical to eat alone, but in fact, slow food means enjoying it with friends. And the greatest criticism that Europeans have of us Americans is that, we treat food like fuel. We drive in, fuel up, and zoom out. And I thought it was so interesting. In my years in Japan, all the great insights from the characters. One of the great characters is a combination, it means taste. It's a combination of the word mouth and not yet. Taste in English derives from what touches the tongue. Taste in Japanese is a character, mouth and not yet. It's what you see, it's what you hear, it's what you smell, it's the anticipation, it's the people you're with, it's the setting you're in. All determine taste or flavor. The great sensual pleasures. If anyone has ever had a miserably cold day in the Boundary Waters, even a box of Kraft macaroni and cheese can be the most delicious thing on the planet. So paying attention to sleeping, don't need to say anything more, but good sleep means good health. Impaired sleep means we ought to be taking a look at what else is going on. The answer is not more Ambien. That does address the issue, but doesn't really address the issue. Next to the fundamentals, moving, and great in a place like this. Yes, and this bouncy floor, and yes. What do we mean by movement? We mean balance, strength, flexibility, everything that is so important for preserving good bone health, good muscle health. Everything that will keep us out of the nursing home is found in balance, strength, and flexibility. I can't find a single pharmaceutical that will support that. It's actually our efforts of coming places like here, coming to the marsh. Balance, strength, flexibility. Now, it's also exercise with that. And I would say that in terms of moving as one of the fundamentals, I'd also say, let's throw gut health and bowel movements in there as well. You know, a bowel movement once a week is not a good thing. Okay. And the last thing is loving or connecting. Connecting with ourselves, connecting with others, connecting with a higher power, living a life of meaning and purpose. This is kind of critical as a fundamental, and it affects our gut health. These are our seeds. So I ask you, and that's why you have the take-home today, is that I want you to reflect. It's kind of like, how are you doing on the 5 fundamentals, and what can you be doing to enhance those? Because there is not a single pill for any of these. And though we live in a culture where there's a pill for every ill, actually we do a lot better if we focus on the fundamentals first, then the pharmaceuticals. All right, so next thing is the good soil. I love this bumper sticker I saw the other day. Let's stop treating our soil like dirt. And unfortunately, we have been treating our soil like dirt in our country. In fact, the nutrient content and the microbial content and the fungal content of a rich loam is kind of like essentially missing now. And it's actually having significant impacts on the quality of the nutritional content of a lot of the foods that we eat. And so, you know, Greg, here you are, gloom and doom, but I just want you to pay attention that actually we really should be treating, should not be treating our soil like dirt. And that includes our own understanding for our own internal garden. And that's why I'm going to focus on the 5 forms of stress. And what are we learning about these? Number 1, environmental. That's not only what's going on at home and going at work and going on in the neighborhood and the like. It could be things like, yes, are you living on top of a firehouse with alarms going off all night? Environmental stress. What about Wi-Fi? Who here is routinely turning their Wi-Fi off at night? All right. Who here, when you open up your computer, finds 35 different Wi-Fis blasting your room? So I want you to pay close attention. Where is your Wi-Fi router? It better not be right at your feet when you're working at the desk. You should just bypass that and just directly connect it. And are you turning it off at night? Simple things. Are you turning your phone to airplane mode so it's not sending signals out every 15 seconds next to your bed all night? So that's environmental stress. You know, out here in the western suburbs, there's a lot of arsenic in the water. How many people are filtering their water? In St. Paul, there's a lot of lead in the water. If you have an older home, there can be a lot of lead in the water, a lot of other things. Filtered water makes sense. We can't count on our cities to do it for us. It's just not happening. Other environmental stress, besides sound, light. Are you sleeping in a dark environment? It's kind of, are you exposed to a variety of petrochemicals in your work? Are you exposed to metallic fumes when you're soldering? The whole idea is that there are a lot of environmental things, and I can go into doom and gloom about this, and it's not a great joy, but just pay attention to actually kind of what we eat, what we breathe, what we drink matters. And if we can go organic, yeah, it's good to do so. It's a really good thing to think about. Physical stress. Physical stress can include things like obstructive sleep apnea, or it can be surgery or chemotherapy or climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. All these things are physical stressors. The same response to the body has a limited response to these things. And these forms of stress can adversely affect and adversely impact our gut ecology. Paying attention to, well, what are my physical stressors? I share these 5 forms because some people come in and they're just kind of, they say, I'm stressed out. I say, well, what do you mean? Environmental stress, physical stress, emotional stress, spiritual stress, pharmaceutical stress, dietary stress? And all of a sudden, oh, it dials down the self-blame. And it's kind of, oh, somehow I'm weaker because have more stress than my neighbor. But in fact, actually, physical stress is a very important part of stress. We need to just acknowledge that. If you've got chronic fatigue, a lot of things are physical stress. Emotional stress. Now, as adults, you all know this. We don't need to cover it. But it can include spiritual stress. Why me? Why now? I blame God for this. This is my punishment. Wrestling with these type of things is a very significant form of stress. Okay, actually this should be pharmaceutical stress for number 4 here. What is a pharmaceutical stress? Prednisone, Ambien, Prilosec. Oh boy, in terms of for gut health, the proton pump inhibitors, which were approved for 12 weeks of use and are often prescribed for 12 or more years, people just never get off. In fact, in the absence of stomach acid, it significantly impairs our gut ecology, our B12 content, significantly increases our risk for a variety of things, including osteoporosis and pneumonias and a variety of things. They're great for relief, but they don't address the underlying cause. So if you know anyone on long-term Prilosec or similar agents, the purple pills that are advertised so much on TV, you say, wait a second, have you addressed the underlying cause? Or is this just a nice Band-Aid and you don't recognize kind of things like gluten reactivity? The last one is actually dietary stress. And dietary stress can include too much, too little, or too much of the wrong things. It can probably include eating at odd times. It can include eating for wrong reasons. But dietary stress can include also a lot of adverse food reactivity. Oh, I didn't know that I had a 1 out of 3 chance of reacting every time I ate an apple, that my body might think it was ragweed or pollen, or that, oh, my grass allergies come out as tomatoes and melons, and every time I have watermelon, I thought et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole long list of adverse food reactivities that are present. The most common one is, has anyone here not heard of gluten reactivity? This is kind of like, good grief, 20 years ago, no one had heard of it, now everyone's heard of it. And now the more we look, the more we find, and actually there is a lot of gluten reactivity that can be playing a role in adverse gut and therefore adverse health consequences. I have to tell you just a way of emphasizing this because it's so important, just showing the power of something. A young man referred to me because he's markedly obese. He's had 5 hospitalizations for a mental health disorder that no one can figure out. He's had a whole slew of medications, not any better. He's failed school. He's now in his 3rd school. And he's they're worried, what are we going to do for this young man who's so challenged? He comes to see me, and one of the questions was, does he have a genetic disease for overeating, Prader-Williams syndrome? And actually, it's very clear he didn't, because I asked him, so tell me about eating. He said, oh, it helps the pain. Oh, what pain? Oh, my abdominal pain. Oh, tell me about that. He said, oh, it just hurts, it hurts. And I said, oh, and when you eat, what happens? The pain goes away. Oh, tell me about that. And how long does that last? Oh, about 10 minutes. So we did a panel, a not commonly used panel for looking for gluten reactivity as one of the possibilities. One of the 5 markers came back extremely high. And I said, well, it's a hypothesis. It's a reasonable hypothesis. Let's try a gluten-free diet. I know it's going to be tough, but bear with me. Make this happen. And let's see what happens. And I kid you not, within a week, his mother was literally running up and down the street saying, my son is back, my son is back. Wow. This young man's life has changed. It's made a huge difference. And it was strictly related to a very infrequently done test. It came back markedly high. It was a hypothesis that we tested. Now, so dietary stress is one thing that can be accessed by keeping a food and symptom diary. Very simple to do. You just kind of literally keep a calendar. It's just kind of like, what did I eat today, what time, how much, was it cooked, was it raw, how did I feel? Am I any better? Oh yes, isn't that interesting? Every time I have this kind of sandwich, I develop a headache. Or, oh, my cough seems to get worse after corn. Things of that sort, whatever the case may be. But adverse food reactivity is under-recognized because we just presume we can eat everything anytime, anywhere. And allergists say there is no such thing as food allergies. And it may be true in a very limited sense. Unless one is having anaphylactic reactions, most allergists aren't going to pay attention to things, reactivity to food. They say it's not really something to treat. But in fact, actually, you can adjust the diet and people feel better. But we like choice. We don't restrict me. I say, no, we're not taking something away. We're taking something steps toward better health. More energy, less headaches, better sleep, less cough, less pain. So it takes us then to the last element here. We're looking to the Einstein of mice. And that is kind of, we've talked about good seeds, we've talked about good soil, now we want to talk about good support. And what is good support? Well, all these things, of course, are support. But in a garden, I cheat. I use Miracle-Gro. That's kind of, for better or for worse. But is there equivalent Miracle-Gro for our gut bacteria? And we say, yes, there is. Prebiotics. Prebiotics are a class of food that actually support the growth of friendly, beneficial bacteria. It's feeding friends rather than, and it's starving thugs. What is a classic type of prebiotic? Fiber. The average American gets 15 grams of fiber per day. Anthropologists say our ancestors had about 100 grams of fiber a day. The average American gets their fiber through two sources: white bread, like Wonder Bread, or French fries. Okay. All right, what are good sources of fiber? All right, well, I'm going to actually challenge you to think about that, and actually maybe you can, Google it and see what are sources that fit for you. But it's going to be things like beans, beans, beans. Well-cooked beans. Okay. It's going to be things like asparagus. It's going to be oranges. It's going to be, it isn't necessarily things which are like celery, which are kind of rough and tough. You can get it in sweet potatoes and avocados, but we don't, in general, we don't get nearly enough fiber. What's a good aim? Boy, if this whole room could do 35 grams of fiber a day, you'll keep the doctor away. Now, the Einstein of mice here is enjoying also good cruciferous vegetable, broccoli. Cruciferous vegetables are nice prebiotics. Examples of this also include cauliflower and kale, and arugula and watercress, and kohlrabi and rutabaga, and let's see, what else? Brussels sprouts. These are all things we can't probably go too wrong with eating these. And if there is a difficulty with eating these, then that raises other things that we need to pay attention to. But it's kind of like good support is fiber, fiber, fiber. Now, we'll have time for questions here. I just want to kind of end on kind of wrapping things up. And we talked about kind of going from science fiction to science fact. And now we're going to talk about going back to the future. And kind of as a Plotnikoff, I find this guy really interesting, Metchnikoff, a Russian born in 1845. In 1892, he was living in Paris and working at the Pasteur Institute. He was to go on in 1908 and get the Nobel Prize in Medicine. But in 1892, he literally swallowed a whole bottle of cholera. Now, you've heard about cholera. It's kind of like a massive cholera outbreak in Yemen. It causes a horrible diarrhea. People can die from it readily. Drank a whole bottle of it. All you need is a few organisms to apparently get sick. He didn't get sick. Gave the same thing to a friend. Didn't get sick. Gave it to a third friend. Got deathly ill and nearly died. He said, why is this? He went in to discover that actually it is the gut bacteria made a difference. That there are gut bacteria that inactivated the cholera, and there are gut bacteria that was more permissive. And this is what led to his work in exploring. He was in blue zones. He was the Dan Buettner of his day, exploring the blue zones and wondering, what are they doing? Oh, they're having fermented milk, what we call yogurt or kefir now. And they're living longer. Why is that? Well, it's adjusting the gut bacteria. And that's where we get into this notion that he said actually, and this is where we are now, more than 110 years later, just revisiting this. The dependence of our intestinal microbes on food makes it possible to adapt measures to modify the flora in our bodies and replace harmful microbes by useful microbes. And that's why we're saying that the attention here, you didn't hear me say probiotic once, although I'm all in favor of probiotics. You didn't hear me talk about a lot of supplements. We're really talking about the fundamentals of life, the 5 fundamentals, and attention to the 5 forms of stress. And the whole idea about self-care being the foundation of everything. And self-care is what's true primary care. So with that, I'll end here and take questions, but thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.